Guys, we are going to do a little work here to see what it's like using the CRAAP test as you evaluate the usefulness of the sources you've chosen for your project. And the first thing I want to do is just talk through kind of the reasons why we do this. We've talked about this before. There is, believe it or not, bad information on the internet. So we want to make sure that we're using evidence that is credible. And credible is a word that just means trustworthy, but we'll use that one a lot. And some sources are better than others, more credible, more trustworthy than others. And so this is just a tool that helps us make sure we're using true information. Now that you have a list of your websites, what we're going to do is we're going to work through, I'm going to show you what it looks like to work through these and to give them a CRAAP test score. And we're shooting for something that's over a 34. First thing you need to know is this is not a perfect process. And so you're using your judgment on some of these ratings that you give. So here's my working annotated working bibliography, and yours should look something like this. Remember, I'm doing my project over Chester A. Arthur, and believe it or not, this project has started to really interest me as I've gotten going. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these sites and we're going to do the CRAAP test on it. And so the first thing I'll tell you is if you've got a .gov site, you don't have to CRAAP test it. That means it's a government site, which means, remember, the whole thing, we want other experts and people looking at it. So I'm going to find one that's maybe a little less known, because I have no idea what employment.laws.com is. And so this website right here, we're going to do the CRAAP test on. So here we are. What we have, Search Laws, Pendleton Act. Okay, so let's look over here at our CRAAP test document. And the first thing we want to look at is currency, the timeliness of the information. And I'm going to add all these questions up, and I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10 score. And so it's kind of loosely, you could give it 2 points per question. It doesn't always work that way, but we'll just see how it goes. So the first thing I want to see is currency. And so what I'm looking for is when was this published? Sometimes you might find it right around here, but sometimes you don't. And so you've got to do a little digging. You tend to find these things at the bottom. I don't see anything here. Let's see if we go all the way to the bottom. The website is still copyrighted, or maybe was copyrighted in 2017. So I can't really find that. But one of the things that you could do is go back to the main page of the website. And let's see what it looks like. Employment laws. Women says candy company fired her for orientation pregnancy. This has nothing to do with my project. So you know what I'm going to say is this looks very up to date. And remember what I said, this won't be perfect all the time, but let's just use this for an example. When was this published? Because this seems like something that's pretty recent. You can see I'm not even looking at my topic right now, but I'm trying to find some answers about this. I don't find anything. This is a tricky one. I should have picked one that I would have known the answer to. Oh, gosh. I don't think this website's going to be perfect, but I think it's probably pretty recent. I'm going to give it, I'm going to at least give it a 1 right here, but we might come back and change things. Has it been revised or updated? I don't know. I can't find any sign of that. I can't find anything about who wrote it. And so again, it seems somewhat official, but that seems like a little bit of a red flag. So I'm gonna give a 1 for that. Is the information current or out of date on your topic? Well, so I've looked at some other things with the Pendleton Act, and this seems like this seems pretty accurate. It's not out of date because this is like talking about something that happened back in 1883. And so I am going to give that a 2. It is up to date. Nothing has changed in regards to the Pendleton Act. Are the links functional? Well, let's try that. Important links. I clicked on laws. That worked. This is a weird website. Sometimes you go to these websites and you're like, this is like putting adware on my computer. I can feel it. But Yeah, the links are working. I wouldn't say this is the best laid out website in the history of the world, but we'll give it a 2 for the links are functional. Is your topic in an area that changes rapidly, like technology or popular culture? Well, I'm talking about the Pendleton Act. That's a pretty specific act from the 1880s, and I would say it doesn't change rapidly, and so I'm just going to give that a 2. Even this is what I'm talking about. It doesn't always add up perfect, like because this isn't like a scoring question, really. But if we were going to add these up, this would be an 8 out of 10 on currency. And so we'll just say, yeah, 8 out of 10. Okay, relevance. The importance of the information for your needs. And so the question is, now I'm moving from the source to what I'm doing. Does the information relate to your topic or answer your question? Yeah, absolutely. I need to find out about the Pendleton Act because that is the act that changed how government jobs were passed out. That's the act that Chester A. Arthur signed. And so that definitely relates to my topic. If it was an article that just talked about Chester A. Arthur, yes, 2 out of 2. If it was an article that talked about James Garfield, all those things can relate because all those are part of my topic. Who is the intended audience? Well, this is an article that looks like it's for people who are looking about employment laws. It's got all types of laws on it, but this would be, again, I don't know how you score this, but these are the kind of things that you want to know. And so the audience is for people who care about laws. It's not anything about Chester A. Arthur or anything like that. Is the information at an appropriate level? Like, basically, was this written for a first grader? Because if it was, I would want to think twice about using it. But this is written for someone who really seems to know their stuff or wants to know their stuff and wants to understand the law. Have you looked at a variety of sources before choosing this one? All of you should be able to answer yes on that. Would you be comfortable using this source for a research paper? Well, that's a subjective question. But the way to look at that is if you brought this in front of me and said, this is where I found my information, what would I say to it? Would I be like, oh yeah, that looks like a great website? Or would I have some questions for you? And would I be skeptical of it? So maybe that's a good little test for you. What would Sisson, Wu, and Mitchell say? But I think this is pretty accurate. And there's at least in my experience by looking at other websites that talk about the Pendleton Act. So I'm going to give that. So relevance, I think this is it's a very relevant site. So I'm giving it a 10. All right, authority, the source of the information. Those of you who are very observant by right now might say, hey, I don't know if there's any. Because the author, publisher, source, sponsor, employment.laws. This website is laws.com. I don't know what to make of that. But I would say laws.com seems like somewhat credible, but I'm gonna ding it a little bit because I can't find anything about who wrote it. There's no so-and-so attorney at law or historian or something like that or professor. I'm gonna give it a 1 because the website seems somewhat official, even though it's ugly. Are the author's credentials or organizational affiliations given? That is a 0. No way. And that's unbelievable that I couldn't find that anywhere. One thing I could look at is if I wanted to go over here and look at, I wonder if there's any sort of about. So that's the other thing. There's no like contact us, about us. Here we go. Laws.com is a legal utility that brings legal innovation through technology. It's driven by talent, creativity, and passion. Okay, here we go. Legal and marketing as the legal search engine, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So this doesn't really tell me anything about them. They care about legal technology. All right, well, or using tech to promote legal things. Okay, so are the author's credentials or affiliations given? No. That didn't tell me anything. What are the author's qualifications to write on the topic? I don't know that either. Is there contact information such as publisher or email address? Well, again, this is where you got to look around. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom, and I'm going to see Contact Us. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to see what happens if I contact them. They've got email addresses. Yeah. Okay, so I can contact them. So I'm going to give that a 2. Does the URL reveal anything about the author or source? Well, it's something about employment laws, so I'm going to give that a 2. All right, so let's add those up. We got 5. So right now I'm sitting at a 23 out of 10. Okay. Accuracy, the reliability, truthfulness, or correctness of the content. Well, to know that, you're going to have looked at other sources. And so in some ways what you're doing is you're measuring the information you find on this source against other things. Well, so it's talking about the Pendleton Service Act, created during the Chester A. Arthur administration. Yeah, that's true. Evolved after the assassination of James Garfield. Well, I know that's true because I've read other sources. Despite his previous love of the spoils system, Arthur became an adamant supporter of the Pendleton Service Act and civil reform in general. I know that's true because I've seen it in other sources. And so I am going to give this a 2 because I know that it's reliable and truthful. So, let's see. So I got to break this down to smaller questions. Where does the information come from? I don't know. So maybe I know that it's accurate, but it doesn't have much evidence in here. So where does the information come from? Well, I don't know. Is the information supported by evidence? Well, again, it sure looks like it is because I've seen this in other places, this information in other places. But they don't have any bibliography. They don't have any sort of citing primary sources or other writings. And so I got to give it another 0, which is kind of frustrating because it's good, I think. Has the information been reviewed or refereed? Again, I don't see anything about that. If it's a .edu, you know it has. Someone who knows what they're talking about has looked at it. This, I don't know. Can you verify any of the information in another source? Yes. So that's what I was talking about earlier. I do know those things are true because I've seen them in other places. Does the language or tone seem biased and free of emotion? Remember, we talked about pathos. And I don't see any of that in this. I'll give that a 2. Are there spelling, grammar, or typographical errors? No, not at all. So I'd give that a 2. So now we're up to a 6. We're coming down to the wire. Okay. Then purpose, the reason the information exists. What is the purpose of the information? It sure looks like it's just informing people about government employment and how you get government employment and who's protected under that and all that. So that's a pretty safe purpose. They're not trying to convince me of anything or anything like that. So I'll give that a 2. Do the author's sponsors make their intentions or purpose clear? Well, kind of. What is the Pendleton Act of 1883? They're trying to inform us. What is the United States Civil Service Commission? It's informing us about history. Why was the Pendleton Act necessary? So I'm going to give that a 2. Is the information fact, opinion, or propaganda? Well, obviously you'd give facts a little bit more weight than you would propaganda. I'll give that a 2. Does the point of view appear objective and impartial? Yes, so I'm going to give that a 2. Are there political, ideological, cultural, religious, institutional, or personal biases? Well, there's something with law, but I can't tell you if there's if your bias is towards equality in the law. I think that's probably pretty fair. But we'll just say, since it's on a law site, maybe, you know what? Forget that. I'm going to give it a 2. You know, if I read something where it was talking about how the spoils system had been awesome and anyone that changed it was horrible, well, that would be bias. That would be an ideological bias. The same way if it was like, this was the greatest thing that ever happened was civil service reform, well, then that would be an ideological bias, but I don't see any of that in this article. So let's add those up. We got another 10. So now I'm going to add these things up. 18, 23, 29, 39. Which places it average. So this would be a usable source, but it might not be the best source. And you may see where it's weak. And I would need to be able to say, hey, yeah, I use this source, but its authority is a little iffy. I don't know who wrote it, but I do know that it is accurate because I've seen this information in other places, and I can check some of that stuff. But I don't know where it comes from. And that's a weakness of this source, but it's still usable. All right, there you go. So good luck as you score the rest of your sources.